Welcome back to another FPL team selection, this time out of Game Week 30, and there will probably be updated versions of the wildcard team, transfer tips, and the team selection. If you want to see that, then be sure to drop a like on YouTube. Let's get this to over 200, and also leave a 5-star review on Amazon Music and Spotify for the podcast version. And I can also do a transfer plans and chip strategy video separately from this, and I can show you my plans until Game Week 38 and when I'm planning to use my remaining chips, and also what I'd suggest for those that still have the free hit, and maybe some other boosters like the triple captaincy, for example. At the beginning of this video, I'll be talking about the confirmed Double Gameweek 34 fixtures and the remaining unscheduled fixtures and when they could fall. All of it will be on screen, of course, but I'll talk about that in the intro, and then afterwards I'll be talking about how I did in Blank Gameweek 29, then swiftly moving on to the team selection for Game Week 30. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. On Saturday, the 23rd of March, we got the confirmed Game Week 34 doubles, and that's 7 teams that will have 2 fixtures, and they include Arsenal, who will face Wolves away, and Chelsea at home, Bournemouth with 2 away fixtures against Aston Villa and Wolves, then Crystal Palace with 2 home games against West Ham and Newcastle, Everton facing Nottingham Forest and Liverpool at home, then we've got Liverpool with 2 away games against Fulham and Everton, Sheffield United versus Burnley and Manchester United on the travels, and Wolves with 2 home games at the Molineux against Arsenal and Bournemouth. Those are the 7 teams doubling, and for Game Week 34 free hitters, I think it's also a nice way to have all the chips available and maybe spread them out accordingly. You have a lot of flexibility in how to attack the last 8-9 game weeks of the season, but I have to say, I also think those that have free hitted already in Game Week 29 could easily build a full 11 of Double Game Week 34 players in that game week, and also wildcard shortly afterwards to optimize a bench boost for 37. I'll be talking about my own strategy very soon, very briefly, but like I said, I'll talk about it in a lot of detail in a separate transfer plans or chip strategy video if you want to see me maybe delve into that a little bit more. But those are the doubles in 34. However, there is one team that will blank in 34, and it's not going to be Brighton as originally anticipated by Planet FPL and Ben Krellin, but instead it's going to be Tottenham Hotspur, who will likely double in either 35 or 36, and they will certainly double in Game Week 37, but Brighton will feature in Game Week 34, and it's Tottenham Hotspur who will not, and that makes things very interesting, and it could also play into the hands of those wildcarding now and free hitting in Game Week 34. And in terms of the unscheduled fixtures, they include Brighton versus Chelsea, Chelsea versus Spurs, Manchester United versus Newcastle, and Spurs versus Man City, and Chelsea and Spurs are likely to double in either Game Week 35 or 36. Then Chelsea, Spurs, Man United, Newcastle, Brighton, Man City will all double in Game Week 37. That is pretty much confirmed. But in terms of the fixtures you see on screen, that's according to Planet FPL and the projections you can find on fpl.team. Be sure to check that out. They are anticipating in Game Week 36 for Chelsea and Tottenham Hotspur to double. Chelsea will be facing West Ham and Tottenham at home, while Spurs would face Liverpool away and also Chelsea away. Then in Game Week 37, Brighton would face Newcastle away and Chelsea at home, whilst Chelsea have a double of Nottingham Forest and Brighton away. Man City will have 2 away fixtures against Fulham and Tottenham, whilst Manchester United would have 2 home games against Arsenal and Newcastle, and then Newcastle would face Brighton at home and Manchester United away, and finally Tottenham Hotspur with 2 home games against Burnley and Manchester City. So that's all the confirmed doubles for Game Week 34, and also the likelihood of the other unscheduled fixtures falling into place, and we should have a small double in either Game Week 35 or 36 for Chelsea and Tottenham Hotspur. The rest would all double in Game Week 37. Let me know your thoughts down the comment section below. But after all of that, let's now head over to my Blank Gameweek 29 review, briefly discuss the disaster that was Blank Gameweek 29 and the waste of that free hit chip. But luckily, if you did use it in such a low scoring game week, you can still do very well from now until the end of the season, especially if you have a wild card to navigate all these upcoming doubles and of course the blank for Tottenham Hotspur in Game Week 34. So let's now head over straight over to that segment, and then later on I'll talk about my team selection for Game Week 30. Check out all the links in the description below for my Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, for all the latest FPL and UCL fantasy updates. There's the Discord server, the FPL League, Drafthound, and also much more, like links to my Spotify and Amazon Music podcast. Be sure to check them out follow me on those platforms and leave a 5-star review. It goes a long way to helping the channel, and consider becoming a patron or channel member if you want to support this channel even further. But let's now head straight into it, starting with the goalkeeper in arguably the worst game week of all time. It was the first game of Blank Gameweek 29 alongside Luton Town vs Nottingham Forest, and once Reguilón got that red card within 7 minutes, and also considering the penalty, you just had that feeling it's not going to be one of those weeks where FPL points are actually going to happen, and Flecken got 2 points in the end. He conceded twice but managed to make enough saves to gain something out of it. I did bench Areola, and at one stage it looked like West Ham would keep the clean sheet. I was fully expecting the Frenchman to keep 10 plus points. Thankfully that didn't happen, otherwise that would have been another dagger and also the final nail in the coffin. But Flecken got 2 points, and ultimately it's going to be a common theme throughout this entire squad. I was actually expecting Tottenham Hotspur to salvage something for me this week, but it wasn't the case, and Tottenham got destroyed by Fulham, and Bedro Porro produced 1 solitary point, and that's pretty much all that they deserved. I think Spurs were completely outplayed, they deserved to lose, but they still created some chances in that game, and they probably should have scored, but it just wasn't their day in any stretch of the imagination, and Bedro Porro has been very frustrating since Game Week 23, you could argue. He was picking up some injuries, of course, they had the blank in 26, but I have to say Tottenham Hotspur were very disappointing. The same goes for Sergio Reguilón, who got sent off, as I mentioned earlier, and he was probably the catalyst for the downfall for Brentford in that week. Who knows what would have happened if he didn't get sent off? Maybe Brentford win that game, and the likes of Wissa and Ivan Toney produce some points, but in terms of their defence, you have to say it's not a big surprise that Brentford conceded in the first place, but the red card in such an early stage of the game, and also conceding the penalty, was a double whammy. And in the end, Reguilón perfectly summed up this game week. If you didn't go for the Spaniard, I would consider that as an absolute win. The final defender was Alfie Doughty. I think there was an interview with Sky Sports where he had an ice pack around his ankle, I believe it was, and Alfie Doughty started the game, but he came off at halftime and is now an injury doubt for Game Week 30 against Tottenham Hotspur. And either way, I think Luton Town assets are sellable. They have no doubles from now until the end of the season. Their next 2 fixtures are really poor, and even longer term, they've got the likes of Manchester City looming on the horizon. Not only that, it's at the Etihad. So I think Doughty is probably a sell, as I discuss in the trans tips video. I bought him with my normal team in Double Gameweek 28 for a hit. Ultimately hasn't paid off regardless, even though he salvaged an assist in that Double Gameweek. And here in Game Week 29, he produced once again just that solitary point. I mean, every single player is pretty much the same story. No returns whatsoever, including Heung-min Son, who is the most popular captaincy option. I believe almost 90% of managers in the top 10k captain the South Korean, and to no avail whatsoever. Then again, if anyone captained, any player in Game Week 29 and got something, you should be very happy, and you probably secured a green arrow in an otherwise dismal game week. James Maddison was actually one of my tips for the captaincy in Game Week 29. That was his first blank in an away match this season, and the first time he's ever blanked at Craven Cottage in the Premier League. So a lot of records were broken. It was also the lowest scoring game week of all time, with an average of 12 points, which is ridiculous when I say it out loud, but that is the sort of week we encountered. You got to laugh about it. Looking at the bright side, most people did poorly this week, and unless you had these differentials like Chris Wood, Morgan Gibbs-White, and most importantly Muniz, I don't really think anyone came out as a victor in this week. Although, if you didn't take any hits and save the free hit chip, I would kind of envy you in that perspective. But then again, some of you might have wasted the free hit chip already. The remaining 2 midfielders include Jarrod Bowen, who also blanked, and he actually had an assist on the board, but the goal was ruled out, and that was the story of that particular match. So many disallowed goals, including the Thomas Soucek late winner, but Bowen did set up Antonio for his brace, and then that was ruled out due to VAR, and that was a big shame to say the least. That would have been my only return for Blank Gameweek 29, and every point was precious in this blank. My last midfielder was Elanga, who I actually put in my starting 11 at the very end of my deadline stream, but really it made no difference whatsoever. The player took out in Leon Bailey blanked, and so did Elanga. Both of them got 2 points, so ultimately I lost no points from that late substitution, and Elanga was very unfortunate. He had an attempt cleared off the goal line, and he also had an assist cleared off the goal line as well. I think Elanga on another day could have easily come out as one of the only bright sparks of an otherwise poor game week, and I think those that went for him in terms of normal transfers or using the free hit were very unfortunate not to see any returns from the Swedish winger. But there you go, that was my midfield. Does it get any better with the forward line? Spoiler alert, it didn't. And those that went for Muniz, absolutely fair play. You definitely won in Game Week 29. He was a doubt in a lot of the build-up to Game Week 29, but Ollie Watkins started the game and I was very confident he would. That's why I kept him on the free hit, but he did absolutely nothing in that match, and Aston Villa were quite underwhelming for the vast majority, and towards the end they got their act together, and it was Zaniolo of all players who ended that West Ham clean sheet, and I can't thank him enough for that because that would have been an absolute disaster from my own perspective. But the other two forwards include Ivan Toney, who has been awful in the last 5 games, no returns whatsoever, and even the underlying numbers don't look particularly great there. He got a booking in the 99th minute. I mean, if someone made a script of everything that could go wrong on the free hit or in Game Week 29 in general from 4 fixtures alone, I think this would have been the perfect kind of script overall, and Ivan Toney has been frustrating for such a long time. I bought him in back in Game Week 26. I thought he'd do really well against West Ham at the time, and ever since that, he has been just pure disappointment. I do expect him to do quite well from now until the end of the campaign, especially when Brentford's fixtures turn in Game Week 32, but at the moment, I don't have much confidence in the Brentford talisman. And finally, Carlton Morris was another one I bought in. I thought he'd do very well and continue his home form. He had returned in 4 consecutive games at Kenilworth Road, but Morris, just like many other players in Blank Gameweek 29, blanked, and it's a week to certainly forget and to laugh about. If anything, it's not worth stressing over such a low scoring and otherwise pretty pessimistic outlook on FPL that a lot of us have built up over the last few weeks. But now, let me show you who I captained, although it made no difference whatsoever. Thankfully, I didn't captain Region. I'm looking at the positives and eager to move on to Game Week 30. I was on Maddison, then I switched to Son. Ultimately, both of them got 2 points, and I think Maddison came closest to a very big haul. He had one effort just wide, and also he assisted Son for another chance, but in the end, both of them didn't have the shooting boots on, and Tottenham Hotspur were quite poor in front of goal, which is very rare for us to say this season. I got 16 points. I actually saved around 7 points if I didn't play the free hit, because I would have taken a -4 hit for the likes of James Maddison and Ivan Toney potentially. So I've gained 7 points on the free hit. I was expecting much more, and I thought it would be a low scoring game week, but this takes the cake. I certainly didn't expect 12 to be the average and for this to be the low scoring game week of all time, but I did go down in rank by around 13,000 places to 306k, so not a great week whatsoever. I wasted the free hit, but thankfully I do have a plan that looks quite solid from now until Game Week 38. I've got 2 boosters remaining, 2 chips in the bench boost and the wild card, and I think I could actually navigate the doubles in 34 and 37 very well, and also have a decent platform for either Double Gameweek 35 or 36. There is a head-to-head clash between my goalkeepers, Dubravka and Areola. I'm currently favouring the Frenchman, and whenever I bench him, he does very well. Not all the time, but a lot of his big hauls have been when he's on my bench, and I just think he has a higher ceiling than Dubravka. But I have to admit, I think Newcastle and Dubravka are slightly more likely in terms of keeping a clean sheet, and I do favour them slightly more defensively. And I have to say, Newcastle have improved in recent weeks, but Botman will be out for 6 to 8 months due to an ACL injury, and that means Lascelles should come back in. I sold Lascelles a couple of weeks ago, and now there is that path for him to enter the team once again. But both West Ham and Newcastle have been 2 of the worst defences in this calendar year, and at the moment I'm favouring Areola. If you have a different opinion, be sure to let me know down the comment section below. There is a gap in my defence that I need to fill, but Pedro Porro looks quite decent at home to Luton Town. I don't expect Tottenham to keep a clean sheet here, and I believe Luton Town have the longest goal-scoring streak of any club after Tottenham failed to convert against Fulham. They were on a 39-game run, and they were second of all time, only behind Arsenal. But I think Luton Town have the longest streak now, and I expect this to be a high-scoring game. Tottenham should win the match, but I think it will be full of chances, and I don't trust Tottenham Hotspur defensively. But I do like Pedro Porro in terms of bonus points and assists. He hasn't scored a goal yet in the Premier League, but you could argue that he is long overdue, and it would definitely be much welcomed for Pedro Porro owners in Game Week 30. My second defender could be Connor Bradley. I'm looking to buy a defender that doubles in Game Week 34, and Bradley would certainly do so, but Trent Alexander-Arnold could be back by Game Week 32 against Manchester United away from home, and that's where Bradley could be a very short-term punt against Brighton and Sheffield United at home in the next 2 game weeks, but beyond that, he might not be a safe option, and that's why I need to reconsider. I was originally looking at Gusto, but after the way the doubles have fallen into Game Week 34, and obviously Gusto won't double in that game week, I am looking at maybe going a different direction, and that's where those wildcarding in Game Week 30 can gain an advantage and go for Gusto from the get-go. It doesn't really suit those that aren't wildcarding until Game Week 35 to go for the Chelsea assets because they only have 1 game in 34, and of course with Tottenham players like Pedro Porro or Son, whoever it may be, they will blank in Game Week 34 and their doubles will be later in the season. Now my final defender is Nathan Ake at home to Arsenal, but it's between him and Zabani for that final defender slot. I also have Saliba, but I wouldn't go for the Arsenal defender, and I would back Manchester City slightly more in terms of chance of a clean sheet and of winning that game, but I might make a late change here in terms of my defender transfer and not go for Connor Bradley and also bring in Zabani for Nathan Ake. There are so many good captaincy options this week, including Heung-min Son, who might be the most popular of them all, at home to Luton Town. Typically, we go to the likes of Salah and Erling Haaland, and I think Salah is the best overall, but I'm looking at Son. He's probably the second or third best on paper, considering the opponent and also the high ceiling he has in these home games. And to be fair with Son, he can do it both home and away against absolutely anybody. I remember back early in the season, a lot of us captained him against Luton Town away, and he did blank, but I'm expecting a different outcome this time round and a much higher scoring game than that 1-0 victory for Tottenham Hotspur. My second midfielder is Cole Palmer, another one I'd firmly introduce into the top 3 captaincy options for Game Week 30, and I think Son and Palmer are my main 2 options for the armband. I think if I had Salah, I'd definitely go for him at home to Brighton, and I'm still looking at buying back Salah, and I could do so as part of a -4 hit in either Game Week 30 or in Game Week 31, but it does require a reshuffle. I could also wildcard and just bring Salah back in, but it will be difficult to do so with free transfers. But I have to say Cole Palmer is essential from now until the end of the season. If you are bench boosting in Game Week 34, then that could be a bit awkward, but maybe you could free hit in Game Week 34, for example, and Cole Palmer is absolutely fine. I'd happily bench him in that week, and then he has 2 remaining doubles in either 35 or 36 as covered at the beginning of this podcast, and then in Game Week 37, Chelsea will almost certainly double as well. My remaining 2 midfielders include Anthony Gordon, who was an injury doubt, but now he's absolutely fine. He played for England against Brazil, and he also featured in the FA Cup against Manchester City. It always seems that Gordon is an injury doubt, but he still somehow manages to play, and now it's 2 home games back-to-back against West Ham and his former club Everton. I think Anthony Gordon could be a great option until Game Week 35, and honestly, Newcastle's fixtures look incredible for the rest of the season, and Newcastle are very likely to double in Game Week 37, so I think Anthony Gordon is Newcastle's best asset overall, but because of the alternatives in the midfield, you might not find a spot for him on the wild card. And the final midfielder is Phil Foden. I actually own Bukayo Saka, who's currently flagged at the moment, and he should be fine to play against Manchester City, according to some reliable sources like Team News and Ticks. But I would favour Foden over Saka in that matchup. The same goes for Ake over Saliba and Man City over Arsenal, since the game is at the Etihad. But Arsenal have beaten Man City 2 times this season in the Community Shield and at the Emirates. It will be a tough game for both sides, but if I had to pick one midfielder or attacker to drop in Game Week 30, it has to be Bukayo Saka, and he's first on my bench at this moment in time. I'm going for a 3-4-3 formation yet again, and Ollie Watkins is firmly in my plans for now, but a lot of managers will start selling him from Game Week 31 onwards, and I've sold him on 2 occasions. I've been burned massively both times, especially the first one when he got 9 points against Chelsea and then 23 against Brighton. But against Wolves, do not sell Ollie Watkins this week, even if it's to fund Salah in the midfield. As part of a -4 here, I certainly wouldn't make that move in Game Week 30, as I discuss in my Trans Tips video and podcast. My last 2 forwards include Solanke at home to Everton. I do prefer him over Saka. I can can see why some of you might be apprehensive about such a move in terms of placing Saka on the bench and starting Solanke, but I'm quite confident that in a home game against Everton, who have really struggled in both boxes this season, Solanke can deliver once again, and he's been incredible in this FPL calendar year and also in this season, especially in the first half. My final forward is Erling Haaland at home to Arsenal. He has blanked in the last couple of games against the Gunners, and he produced exactly 0 XG at the Emirates, and also I think in the Community Shield it was next to 0 as well. But at the Etihad last season, around April, I think it was, in 2023, Erling Haaland delivered one of his best performances in a Man City shirt against Arsenal. Now, different circumstances. Arsenal entered that game after drawing, against the likes of Southampton, Liverpool and West Ham, fumbling 2-0 leads and looking like they were losing grip on the title at that stage. They look much more composed right now, but I still think Erling Haaland is capable of scoring at least a goal against the Gunners, and he could still score 2 goals or get 2 goal contributions quite easily, since the game is at the Etihad, where Man City are unbeaten. I think their last defeat was against Brentford last year, but they have drawn a lot of games, and I think it'll be a very competitive and tight match. But just like I said with Foden earlier, I do prefer the Man City attackers over Saka or any other Arsenal midfielder or forward, and that's why I'm going for this setup. But like I mentioned earlier, Connor Bradley might be changed in terms of my transfer, and I might also start Zabani instead of Nathan Ake. If you have any thoughts on that, be sure to let me know. But let's now talk about the captaincy and my bench. As things stand, I'm going for Dubravka, Saka, Zabani and Saliba on my bench. Dubravka and Zabani could come into the starting 11, and there is an outside chance for Saka to do the same. Now, apparently he has an injury problem, and it's mainly precautionary. That's why he was pulled out of the England squad, but they're giving him time to rest and to kind of manage that. A lot of these injuries that are happening might be long-term issues. I think Gabriel's another example who's currently yellow flagged, but I wouldn't be too worried about them, and they should play against Manchester City. I'd be very surprised if they didn't. But in terms of the captaincy, I'm definitely steering away from Man City versus Arsenal. I know Erling Haaland can do well against anybody, but my captaincy would fall under either Palmer or Heung-min Son, and I'm currently going for the Tottenham attacker with Palmer as my vice. That could easily switch as well by the deadline stream and also in my next team selection video and podcast. And there's also Salah. If you have him, I'd highly recommend captaining the Egyptian at home to Brighton. And if you don't have him in Gameweek 31, you might be burned massively when Liverpool host Sheffield United. So I'm definitely buying back Salah by Gameweek 31. I might even do so this week, but as things stand, I'm looking at bolstering my defence and going for someone like Connor Bradley to also optimise Double Gameweek 34, and the plan would be to get Salah by Gameweek 31, as I'll show you very soon. But let's now head over to Drafthound, see what they're recommending in terms of the player rankings, and then using fpl.team, I'll give you a sneak preview of Gameweek 31. There is a link to Drafthound in the description below. I'd highly recommend you check it out and see all the tools that are available. A lot of you have signed up using my link, so I do appreciate it, but it also helps you out in terms of gaining more insight in FPL and enjoying the game to another extent, because all these algorithms, numbers, and all these tools actually enhance your experience of FPL. The player rankings for me is my favorite feature. They've currently got Son as the highest in terms of expected points, Palmer second, Haaland, Salah and Foden complete the top 5, and Drafthound really fancy Havertz at the moment. They're recommending to buy him, and that's a very interesting differential to say the least. They also suggest the best wildcard and free hit teams for every single game week. There is so much more, like predicted lineups, player comparisons, all of that is available as a pro pay tier member, so be sure to check it out. They also have this optimization tool which sorts out your bench, your captaincy decisions and all of that at the click of a button, and they suggest Son as my captain, Palmer as my vice, and to start Dubravka over Areola, and to go for a similar back three of Pedro Porro, Ake and Zabani. But factoring in my transfer, my proposed one of Bradley in for Alfie Doughty, we can use the player rankings, bring in Bradley, and we'll see what they suggest in terms of my starting 11. If we then optimize this, they recommend to bench Zabani as well, and to pretty much order things in the exact same way with Saka, Zabani and Saliba on my bench, but the only change is Dubravka coming in for Areola. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below about Drafthound and also about everything you've seen in this video. But let's now head over to fpl.team to discuss Gameweek 31. To get Salah back, it requires a -4 hit in either Game Week 30 or 31, and with my provisional transfer of Bradley in for Alfie Doughty in Game Week 30, I could then take a -4 hit and buy Salah back for Sheffield United at home, and my team would look like this. Dubravka in goal, Ake, Bradley and Saliba as the back three, Gordon, Foden, Palmer, Salah and Saka as the midfield five, with Haaland and Solanke up front, and my bench would be Areola, Muniz, Zabani and Pedro Porro. I'd have to sell Watkins and Heung-min Son to facilitate Salah, and also take a -4 hit for Muniz, who would be first on my bench away to Nottingham Forest. But in Game Week 30 and 31, I could theoretically have a full starting 11 of home players. Now in Game Week 30, I'm going for Areola over Dubravka right now, but if I do switch that up, that's 2 consecutive game weeks with an entire 11 full of home players, which is another massive advantage, and Salah would almost certainly be my captain in Game Week 31. There's no doubts about that whatsoever, although Saka is a nice alternative at home to Luton Town. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Let's get this video to the 200 likes and let's keep on pushing towards 23k subscribers and beyond. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the latest updates for FPL and UCL Fantasy. You can also find me by typing in FPL Dylan as well. There's a link to the Discord server, the FPL League, Drafthound, and much more, like Spotify and Amazon Music. Follow me on those platforms, leave a 5-star review, it goes a long way to helping the channel, and thank you to those patrons and channel members for supporting the channel even further. There are links in the description below for them as well. I wish you all the best of luck for Game Week 30 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.